Awesome, awesome. So we will start now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. My name is Moses Ngorok. I'm a business lawyer. I have been practicing business law for the last 9 years, going to 10 years in a few months. I have a passion to work with businesses across Africa. My belief is that businesses are often an opportunity to develop the continent. So I set up a consultancy called Wezi Consultants Limited. What we do, what we're focusing on is merging technology and law to bring down the cost of legal services. From my experience and from our research, we discovered that one of the key challenges alongside capital that entrepreneurs have on the continent is the fact that accessing legal services can be really, really costly. And we've looked around and seen that one of the best ways to ensure that businesses can access legal services is to decentralize service delivery, like in a way democratize legal services by allowing people to provide a level of service of legal services for themselves, like a DIY kind of situation. That is, for example, if we could upload, business forms, contracts online, then with a few tweaks and changes, an entrepreneur can access valuable legal contracts. That's one of the things we thought would be important to do. At the same time, also, so that the lawyers do not lose business, technology has the ability to help a law firm and a law practice scale its operations, thereby bringing down the unit cost. So that way lawyers are able to provide services to several people, so the revenue is still high, and then allows them to charge a lower price. So that's our passion as a business, and we're growing towards that. We are passionate about it, but my focus as an individual is obviously technology and law, but I also love working with SMEs, like just getting in and seeing how we can blend law and business strategy. And we believe that the future lawyer or the current lawyer should be one that understands how the law blends into business strategy. So that's where I come from today. I'm happy to start right now. We're just going to get straight into it if there are no questions. So we'll start by defining, or did my screen freeze? Okay, we'll start by defining what we believe. Of course, today's session is understanding the law on startups in Uganda. That is the business law for startups. We know that there are startups all over the world. I think the Silicon Valley is like the hub of startups, and many of us know the story of Facebook and others. But today we'd just like to focus on what the law looks like in Uganda. It's going to be an overview. I like to be as practical as possible. So this will be very conversational. Where you have a question and need to ask the question, please go ahead, raise your hand, and then we will have a discussion. So I'll start by defining what a startup is. A startup is a newly established business which may take any business form. So contrary to what people believe, that all startups are companies. No, a startup can be a sole proprietorship, can be a partnership, etc. So that's the definition that I have. And we, in the startup world, the word founder is very common. And would like to also define, who a founder is. A founder is an individual or entity which conceives an idea, or who conceives an idea, develops it, and launches it into the market. So that's who a founder is. So since we're talking about Uganda, we're generally going to look at the legal framework for business, doing business, since we define that a startup is a business that's starting out. So definitely it's considered a business in Uganda, whether it's a sole proprietorship, partnership, or company. And there are laws that govern business operation. Now, note that this is not an exhaustive list. I've picked out the major laws because there's a huge list of laws and regulations, but these are the primary laws. If you know these ones, you're kind of safe, you know. Of course, the most important one is the Companies Act of 2012. We have the Partnerships Act of 2010. We have the Business Names Registration Act. We have the Trustees Incorporation Act. So Partnerships, Companies Act is for companies, partnerships for partnerships. Business names sets out how one picks, how to register a business name. That's sole proprietorships, and also generally what kind of names are acceptable for companies or not. If you've registered a company before, you may have faced an instance where it's been difficult to maybe register a name, or the name has been rejected. So the standard for business registration is under that law. We also have what we call the Trustees Incorporations Act, that basically a law that governs the establishment and registration of trusts. Trusts are also a form of business entity. We have the Electronic Signatures Act. This allows for the signing of electronically of documents like contracts, policies, etc. We have the Financial Institutions Act that governs banking law in Uganda. We have the Insurance Act that also regulates the insurance industry. We have the Electronic Transactions Act. We have the Computer Misuse Act. Electronic transactions basically govern things like e-commerce. Are we together? So govern things like e-commerce. The Computer Misuse Act regulates how we should use computers. If you've lately seen any prosecutions around what people post on Facebook, all these are founded on the Computer Misuse Act. Then we have a recent law, the National Payment Systems Act. This governs fintechs, basically, like electronic payments, mobile money, Airtel money, MTN mobile money. Those are covered. So anything to do with the fintech world, covered by the National Payment Systems Act. We have the Data Protection Act. This regulates the management, the storage, collection of personal or individual corporate data. So it's also a recent act, it's a recent law. And as you can see, the laws that I've picked out are those that I believe are very relevant to startups. A lot of startups are technology driven, and you find that these laws are what are very important. The Insolvency Act looks at how you can wind up or liquidate your company, and why your company may be liquidated in a compulsory manner. The other one that we have is the Industrial Property Act. This covers intellectual property, so copyrights, patents, trademarks, trade secrets, designs, geographical indicators. It covers all of those. So having talked about the legal framework, because we're talking about Uganda, now everything's going to focus on Uganda. We'll be looking at how do you form and structure a business in Uganda. I've already hinted and said the types of businesses that can be set up in Uganda are sole proprietorships, partnerships, companies, cooperatives, savings and credit cooperatives. And we all know cooperatives, they bring together, people doing a similar activity, and allows these people to to collectively bargain for better prices, to market their produce collectively. Because if you do it individually, then you find that you have, it can be more expensive, and also negotiating power also becomes, is weakened. But if you get together as a group, it works. I think it was a big thing in the 70s, and that's still being revived, but it exists. We also have collective investment schemes under the capital markets laws, individuals are allowed to come together, set up companies, trusts, and entities to invest for investment purposes. Those are regulated by the Capital Markets Authority. We have trusts. Trusts are set up especially for situations like, for estate planning and situations. They are very convenient, especially where someone wants to leave an asset or assets under the control of another, and it may be convenient if you're going out of Uganda or you want to focus on something else and do not want to be involved in the day-to-day management of an asset. Or clubs do charitable work like Rotary, Rotaract, Lions, and the like. Those are clubs. They are set up as companies limited by guarantee and allow individuals, professionals, and the like to come together for charitable work. And non-governmental organizations under the Non-Governmental Organizations Act 2016 allow the government to regulate development work. Of course, it's the mandate of the government to provide social services, but where this is not possible due to deficits in budget and the like, individuals and entities can come alongside the government and complement the government's work. And so such entities are regulated as non-governmental organizations. We are familiar with those, I hope. They're registered as companies limited by guarantee, and then a second registration is done with the National Bureau for Non-Governmental Organizations. Next thing is we have building societies. It's not very common in Uganda, but companies established for the purpose of real estate, construction, and the like. Unincorporated ventures, sometimes it's possible to actually do business without necessarily having to register your business. You could just sign, a simple contract. It could be an agreement for collaboration, a joint venture agreement. So all of these are the different forms of business that you can participate in. But today I really want to focus on one. Like I said, truth is we can't turn over all the stones. We will just try and be strategic and focus on that, which I believe is very important for you to know. And today we're going to focus on companies because they're the most common form of entity used by startups, especially those that seek funding from, like, say, venture capitalists, private equity firms, angel investors, and any other kind of funding. Because if you're going to pursue equity funding, it means that you are going to exchange equity and control in your company for an amount of money. So that means having an entity like a sole proprietorship or joint venture or the like that are not incorporated would not be suitable, because then you won't have the shares to give. So companies tend to be the best type of entities to use, especially when you foresee a need for equity funding. So the types of companies in Uganda, we have public companies, private companies. Public companies are those that are listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange, like MTN Uganda has just done. So that's, I think they're about, let me try and remember, about maybe 21 listed companies. So between 19 and 21 listed companies on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Private companies are companies that have 1 to 100 members. They're not listed on the stock exchange. Private companies can be private companies can be both limited by shares, limited by guarantee. Limited by shares means that it's a for-profit company, meaning that it's primarily set out as a profit entity, a for-profit entity, whereas companies limited by guarantee is set up usually to do charity. But we also do have a hybrid, a hybrid of this. Is a company called Company Limited by Guarantee with a share capital. So that's a company that is a charity, but is allowed to also, declare dividend, meaning that it also does business. So those are usually set up as social enterprises. So those in the social impact space would like to, you can explore that type of company. It's growing, the registration, people are seeking registration of such companies, more and more. So the other categorization we have legally is, whereas we have public and private, we also have local foreign companies. What is regarded as a local company is a company that's incorporated in Uganda with Ugandan nationals holding the controlling interest. That is 51% shares and above, or that Ugandan nationals actually on the board of directors have a higher or greater voting rights in terms of numbers of directors or in terms also of voting power, Foreign means the opposite. It just means that non-citizens have control. Then we also have, for the purpose of startups, would like to note that the Companies Act also allows what we call a group structure, where you have a holding company, subsidiary company. A holding company is a company which basically is a parent company that hosts and has interests in other companies. So it's usually suitable for a business that has diverse interests. So you have maybe interest in sugar, interest in sugar manufacturing, interest in oil, refining or something. And so it's a whole different, and you don't want to mix the businesses. So it's best to do like a group structure. And yeah, so that would be, so you do a holding company and then have subsidiaries. Examples of this include like the Ruparelia Group, Alam Group of companies, I think Mukwano as well. And then finally, in terms of like categorizations, we're looking at limited and limited. Limited by shares means that that and this forms the crux of why we set up companies, in that the company is distinct from its owner. That if you sign the memorandum saying that, I'm taking up these shares, it means your liability, if you say you're limited, your liability as a shareholder is limited to the number of shares that you have. So your liability, say to creditors, the company's credit is limited to the shares you hold in the business. It cannot exceed that. So if you own an equivalent of, say, 5 million worth of shares, the maximum you'll be paying out as an individual is 5 million shillings. Otherwise, you're untouchable. The business is distinct from you. So the business, in case of a creditor's petition to wind up the business, it will be considered that you as an individual are separate from the business, and the business is broke, but you are not. So that's why we set up companies. It's one of the beautiful things about having a company. So we'll go forward. I want to wrap this as much as, to move as fast as possible so that we can have a discussion. I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the organs of a company. So we all know that a company is inanimate, in the sense that it's not a person. It's a person in law, but it cannot do things for itself. People need to run it. So therefore, they are, within company law, they're recognized organs, people that actually run these companies. We have people referred to as shareholders. Earlier on, we talked about who a founder is. Usually the shareholders are the founders, or it could be the founders and other people that have been brought on board, like equity partners. So in a company that is limited by shares, i.e. a for-profit entity, we have what we refer to as shareholders. They are the owners of the business because they own the shares in the business. If it's a non-profit, like an NGO, these are referred to as members, because they hold, they're the ones that started. They are what we call, they're the ones that started the business, and so they own it. And the shareholders and members are the topmost organ of the company. So very important to note that. Then we have the second organ, which is the board of directors. Usually this is like the technical arm of the business. the company, in the sense that they have the expertise and the know-how to run the company. They're usually responsible for developing and leading the execution of the company's strategy. So usually minimum requirements under the law is you need to be 21 years and over. That's the minimum requirement. And then you ought not to be of unsound mind. You have to be level-headed. Bankrupts and the like are not permitted to be directors in companies. And the other thing I must mention is that also there's what we refer to as corporate governance. Corporate governance there are rules that state how companies should be managed. Under the Uganda's Companies Act, corporate governance standards are not mandatory for private companies, but are mandatory for private companies. So there's a table for corporate governance. And usually regarding the board of directors, it's advisable to have a broad a board of directors of broad experience, that is in terms of age, in terms of qualifications, very, very important. Of course, we do also have a type of company called a single member company, and in such situations, usually you have a single director. So it may not be possible to have a broad board in terms of qualifications and age and experience if you have a single member company. But usually, to make your business investable and bankable, it's advisable to have a group of directors that are really, really qualified in terms of experience and age. So let's move on quickly. How do you manage the company? You manage the company by having meetings. So remember the two organs: shareholders, members, shareholders / members, and then board of directors. These different organs have meetings. We have what we refer to as the general meeting. This is a meeting of shareholders or members. It's usually held once a year. If you've heard of annual general meetings, this is the nature of a meeting. And here, the performance of the company is appraised by the owners. They have the power to elect and dismiss the board of directors. They review financial reports and set targets for the following year so that the directors follow, the same, setting targets that, smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, yeah? Then we have what we call the statutory meeting. This is basically a general meeting, which is required to be had by, in law. By the law requires that every company should have a general meeting within 18 months of its incorporation. So if your company has not had this, then just know it's important legally. Otherwise, it can be struck off the company's register. Then the other type of meetings is board meetings. These are the most common type of meetings. Like I've mentioned, the board of directors usually meets up to discuss where is the company at, where should we be, refocus the the energies of the team that works under the board of directors. So the board of directors hires the executive director or CEO. It appoints a management team officials like secretary, other officials, human resource, marketing, and the like. Then we have a type of meeting called the extraordinary meeting. These are impromptu meetings of the board of directors or the general meeting to handle urgent matters. So usually how the meetings are handled or how they are to be regulated is set out in a document called the Articles of Association. We'll talk about that a little later. So the standards are set there, but also you're allowed to have meetings as and when required if there's an emergency. So that's about how to manage your company. So when you set up the company, you have it running. Before you have it running, what key legal documents are you expecting to sign? So in terms of legal documents, usually this is the part that actually affects startups, because a lot of people get in. The idea is exciting. It's fun. It's it's life changing. You're going to have a unicorn, but the question is, have you properly set out how you as co-founders are going to relate? And the documents that are fundamental, in my view, to sign are one, the Memorandum of Association. So when you're setting up the company, when you're establishing it, you sign a document that sets out the objectives, how many shares each person is going to have, co-founder is going to have, each founder is going to have. So it's set out in the Memorandum of Association. So that's an important document. That one you usually sign. It's a company form provided by the government. Also, alongside the Memorandum of Association, you have Articles of Association, which regulate the relationship between the different shareholders. So this is between shareholders. So it regulates how voting rights are distributed, dividends will be declared, how meetings will be held, the appointment, the roles of the different officials are set out in the Articles of Association. But co-founders or shareholders are allowed to be more specific about these roles, to basically create their own or customize the terms of their relationship by signing a document referred to as a shareholders agreement. So this document sets out in fine print how the different shareholders will relate. And this is actually the document that most times VCs and private equity firms will be interested in you signing. And these are these documents are very key alongside the term sheet. It will be very important for you to ensure that the terms are solid, because it's there where the investor will probably state that they are taking preferential shares in the company rather than common stock or ordinary shares. It's there that they will talk about how they would like to exit, at what time they will exit, and how they'll go about it. So it'll be very, very important to take note of that. And then, of course, the business will interact with different people. So you have, suppliers, you have people that provide services. So you'll have service level agreements and supplier contracts. Important to have those, because a business can go bust when you have a supplier suing you for an amount, and that basically shuts down your business. Employee contracts, independent contractor agreements, terms and conditions agreements on websites, trust deeds, share purchase agreements. So if you're selling out to investors, you will need to sign those. Memorandum of understanding, especially when you're establishing collaborations, relationships, non-disclosure agreements, and so on and so forth. There's so many. I just listed out the common ones. Then the other thing that I noted is really, really common often is there are usually a lot of employee disputes, So you start out as co-founders and you're like, yay, this is fun. Then along the way, you're like, okay, what's due to me? What's my remuneration, when the idea has gotten on, the market is catching on with it. Some people have been helping out. So they say, hey, we are co-founders. No, you're like, no, you're an employee. So how do you manage employee matters? In Uganda, the employment contracts may be oral or written, so it's possible for you to just have an oral agreement with whoever you bring on board to provide maybe some technical support, in terms of the running of your business. But it's advisable that you have this written. That's the best. That's the gold standard, in my view. Please have your agreements written where you can. Then in terms of probation, you can't have people working on probation for more than 6 months. Sometimes startups, of course, because we bootstrap, one of the things that we like to do is to bring on interns, but be mindful that internships, volunteerships, contracts of apprentice, you have like apprentices and the like, cannot be more than 36 months long. So be mindful of that. Otherwise, you'd have to convert that to, you'd have to convert that to an employment contract. There's no prescribed number of employees. There's no limit on the number you can have. You can go for as many as you need. Where you have more, but where you have more than 5 employees, you will have to remit or contribute Social Security to the NSSF, the National Social Security Fund, which will collect that as a Social Security for the employees. That's usually 10% of the employee salary. Employers shall issue sufficient notice before terminating contracts. So depending on how long someone has worked for you, you'll have to be mindful of the notice periods. Because if you don't, the Employment Act is very retributive. Yeah, it's very, very, very strict, and employees have enjoyed a lot of, have enjoyed good claims with the courts, for unlawful dismissal. So that, be very careful, because that could bankrupt your startup before you even get up. Other things in terms of employment matters, employees should work for no more than 48 hours. I know as startups, we usually like, oh my, the idea is good, everyone is in and you work long hours. But where that happens, you can alter the requirement to work less than 48 hours by signing an agreement with the employee. If the employee agrees to work more than that, that's okay. Also in situations where, the employee is working for in shifts, it's allowed to extend, because shifts means you could do 16 hours today, rest tomorrow. So long as, in a shift, arrangement, so long as this does not exceed 48, so one can work more than 8 hours a day. Yeah, so basically, but by agreement, you can alter that. Employees are entitled to leave for up to 21 days in a year. So very important. That's also a ground usually for, the courts will want to enforce that. And fair dismissal, you cannot fire people on grounds of pregnancy, health conditions like HIV or the like. You need to be very careful when dismissing employees. Other things is, where there's injuries at work, in the course of work, then the employer is required to compensate the employee. Employee should be paid in legal tender, except as allowed in the Act. So generally, you can pay using checks, but you should pay using cash, but the Employment Act will allow you to pay using checks and other methods, and also in kind to an extent. In kind meaning that it may not necessarily be money, but it could be shares or the like. But the mandated form is legal tender. That is the Uganda shilling, or maybe $1, Foreign employees must obtain work permits. So employment of foreigners is dissuaded where local talent is available. So usually you must persuade, the Citizens and Immigration Control Board that's situated at the Ministry of Internal Affairs that local talent is not available. So you need to, very, very important as you structure yourself, that you have this in mind. And then the other thing that is common, we also, in businesses, is the issue of restraint of trade and bonding agreements. So you may want, to keep talent, and so have them sign these contracts where you say, if you leave us, you can't move on to a similar business. Those are carefully considered by the courts, and it's noted that, restraint of trade and bonding agreements must be reasonable. Yeah, usually a period over 3 years is not acceptable. The geographical reach, if you say you cannot work across Africa in a similar fintech, that's also considered unreasonable. So the geographical scope is also limited by the courts. But these are handled on a case-by-case basis. The other aspect is you have to file labor returns to show how many employees you have every, at the end of the year. Every financial year or the like, you need to file returns to the Labor Office, because the Commissioner for Labor, the Ministry of Labor, Gender, Labor, and Social Development. So that's it about employment matters. We'll go on and say, okay, so you've set up, you have all these things running, but you need licenses. Mandatory licenses include the trading license. If you have a physical location, you get this from the local authority in which your business operates. So if you're operating in Wakiso, from Kampala, KCCA, from Mbale, Mbale. So that's what happens. The other thing that the other type of license is industry-specific licenses, depending on what kind of industry you're in. If you're in coffee, you're looking at, you get, a coffee processing license and the like. If you're in the financial sector, you need to get approvals and licenses from Bank of Uganda. If you're a lawyer, you need to get a practicing certificate from the Law Council, a doctor from the Medical Council, so you have all these licenses. There are many, it just depends on what you're doing, but important to have them. If you don't have them, then you may have issues with the authorities. The other type of license that is common is investment licenses for foreign-owned, companies, i.e., invest where we have foreign investors. Usually, these are obtained from the Uganda Investment Authority, and you ought to prove that you are going to invest an approximately, or say, $100,000 and above, both in terms of capital and assets. So that's a requirement in order to get that license. That license allows you then to operate a business in Uganda. So the other types of licenses, import and export licenses. So very important to have this in case, as a startup, you're looking at manufacturing in Uganda and sending your goods out of Uganda, or doing the reverse, getting raw material from out of Uganda. The other thing, since we're startups, we want to talk about use of technology. As we know that internet penetration is growing in Uganda, the use of mobile phones is up there. So people are growing, social media is also growing. So how do you set out if you're technology driven, if your startup is technology driven, you're going to have to be mindful of the different approvals required. The key institutions that you're likely to interface with are the National Information and Technology Authority and the Uganda Communications Commission. The National Information and Technology Authority looks at, it regulates the use of technologies in Uganda. The UCC looks at, the use of things like radio, satellite, so basically communications equipment that to be used in Uganda. So any type approval for equipment, communications equipment, is granted by the UCC. If you're like a fintech dealing with payment systems and the like, anything to do with that type of ecosystem is regulated by the Bank of Uganda under the National Payment Systems Act. Looking at other types of technology like aircrafts, drones, must be approved by the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority. And then it's also important to note that industry-specific technologies are approved by the departments, agencies, or ministries under which your business falls. So for example, take an example of COVIDX, which is a pharmaceutical innovation by the professor. I mean, we all know about it, those who've been following the news in Uganda. You see COVIDX was required approval by the National Drugs Authority. So you'll find that depending on what kind of invention or innovation you have, different departments will be responsible for giving approvals. But all of these are it's just about paying the required fees and you get the necessary approvals if you meet the criteria. Then the other thing that we want to look at, now we're going to consider government compliance standards generally. We're about to get to the end, guys. I would like to be wrapping up soon. But in terms of compliance standards, generally, when you set up this company, there are some filings you have to make, such as a return on allotment of shares 60 days after every allotment. You need to notify the registrar of your physical and postal address 14 days after incorporation. I've talked about obtaining a trading license, getting the licenses as well. That is important. You need to register for taxes with the Uganda Revenue Authority so that you can comply with your tax obligations. or where even if you don't have, you're not going to earn a profit, or you're set out as a non-profit, you still need to register to get a tax exemption. Then you need, where you have employees, you need to register the National Social Security Fund. You also need to get a bank account. That's optional, but yes, you will probably need that. You need to file your income tax returns, which need to be filed in accordance to the Income Tax Act. You need to file company annual returns to show the status of shareholding and directorship in the company every 12 months with the company's registry, which is the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. You need to register all your resolutions, keep a record of all minutes, register the members and shareholders of the company, keep a list of all securities and debentures of the company, have the company's accounts audited annually, have a company seal, issue share certificates and share warrants. For NGOs, file NGO returns, get NGO licenses, renew those periodically where it need be. Obtain work permits for your foreign employees and volunteers, comply with data protection laws, observe occupation, health, and safety standards for your industry. That's very, very important. Then we run on to a very key aspect of startup work, which is protection of intellectual property. So Uganda's intellectual property laws allow for protection of copyrights, trademarks, service marks, patents, trade secrets, designs, geographical indicators, layouts. These are can be registered locally, or you can choose to register with the continentally with the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, which is based in Harare, Zimbabwe. They're about, let me try and remember, I think 16 members. What happens is if you do a continental registration for things like trademarks and patents, you get a waiver on doing registration, like some levels of some steps are waived if you're going to do registrations in the member states, i.e. this is good for businesses that are expanding. So if you're going multinational as a startup, you want to cut down on intellectual property costs because it can be expensive registering in each country. Intellectual property is a jurisdictional kind of right, it's Kenya, Uganda, Congo, you need to have like for each jurisdiction. But these organizations, like the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization, allows you to do a registration in one country, and then that is recognized in other countries. And basically, maybe, like for patents, the examination of your patent is, the step of examination is waived, and basically it's just you go straight to registration, which becomes cheaper. So that's what I would advise. So members of ARIPO, Uganda is a member of ARIPO, that is the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization. So you'll enjoy similar rights like in Kenya, Zimbabwe, Zambia. I can send you a list later. Lesotho, so a few other countries. So, and then you can also do a registration of the World Intellectual Property Organization, which in short we call WIPO. So WIPO also allows you enjoy the same rights but worldwide, so it can immensely cut down your costs. So very important to have this in mind as part of your business strategy, in case you're looking at expanding, going Africa-wide. The other thing that you can do, of course, the law allows you to license and franchise. So you can license these and in such way monetize your intellectual property. But important to note that intellectual property rights are time bound; they are not perpetual, so they expire. So like trademarks, 10 years, copyrights, the lifetime of the author plus 50 years after the death. Then you have patents, 7 years. So it's important to ensure that you take care that you don't register once and forget. So you have to periodically renew. Then, of course, this conversation wouldn't end without talking about taxes. Uganda's tax regime is geographical for all Ugandan residents and source-based for non-residents, meaning that a resident person is considered not only Ugandans, but even non-citizens who spend an average of 122 days in Uganda in a given year continuously. So if you spend 122 days continuously, you're considered, for tax purposes, you're considered a resident, and therefore your income earned in Uganda and outside Uganda will be considered for taxes, unless we have a situation where there's a double tax agreement. But generally, for those that are non-residents, only the income sourced from Uganda is what is taxed. So there are methods of calculating what is taxable, but generally, only profits are taxed for businesses. So we're now going to focus on businesses. The corporation tax is 30%. Yeah. However, this is for companies, but other types of individual small businesses have a progressive type of tax for small businesses. We can have that conversation. We can get into the nitty-gritties another time. But the corporation tax is 30% of profits. There's also a property tax where a business, say, owns property that is considered not part and parcel of its main business. So you pay 20% plus, I think, 20% of that. So they deduct 2,820,000, and then 20% of the after the deduction. So there's also a type of tax called a withholding tax. So this is it's withheld at source at the time of payment. This is imposed on payments such as payments on dividends and interest, professional fees. It's imposed on every non-resident person for dividends, royalties sourced from Uganda. Usually that's about 6%, but for foreign remittances, it's around 15%. But the standard is 6% of what is being paid. You're required to hold it. That's what they call a withholding tax, and then remit the same to URA. The other thing that in terms of tax considerations, these are the countries that Uganda enjoys a double tax arrangement with: Denmark, India, Italy, Mauritius, the Netherlands, Norway, South Africa, the UK, and Zambia. Then after taxes, we can always get into the other type of tax is value-added tax. This is a tax on goods and services. It's usually 18%. So this tax, for the supply of goods and services, unless, And then we also have an import duty, an export duty, an excise duty tax. Imports, obviously, for bringing in, goods. Exports, for sending out goods. Excise duty is it's a tax on luxurious goods like wines and spirits. It's important to note that for when looking at taxes, that Uganda is part of the East African community and enjoys a form of collaboration with other East African states like Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and they have a common market and a customs union, most importantly, a customs union, which has gotten them to waive some import duty and export duty fees within the region. So we are moving towards, I think, waiving those within the region, but as it stands, there are rules and regulations around that. We can get into that another time, the details of that. Now we want to talk about funding for your business. How could you fund your business in Uganda? Uganda possesses both sources of both equity and debt financing. So it's possible to do both equity and debt financing in Uganda. There are about over 25 commercial banks and microfinance institutions. Available equity funding sources include venture capital, private equity, private placements. You can do private placements, listing on the Uganda stocks and Uganda Securities Exchange, etc. In detail, this is what it looks like. You can do personal savings. You can get equity funding from like your personal savings or friends and family, private investors and venture capital partners, initial public offers, private placements. In terms of debt financing, you can look to banks, you can do credit, you can do savings and credit cooperative societies, investment clubs, money lenders, microfinance. So yeah, just in case your business is not running well, or you want to shut shop, this is what you will do. We refer to this as insolvency or winding up. Winding up when you choose to, to shut down your business yourself. Insolvency is when you fail, you're unable to meet the demands of your creditors. A company may be wound up voluntarily by its creditors, so by passing a resolution, and then you follow a process. There's a process you follow, and then you'll be considered as wound up. So this process is provided for under the Insolvency Act. The other way is that also the creditors could wind up the company. If you fail to pay them, they will petition court and wind up your business. So partnerships and individuals are dissolved as well, by agreement or by a bankruptcy order issued by a court. So that's what you do to close up shop in Uganda. So to liquidate your business in case you decide to move out of the market. The other thing you're looking at is we need to look at is how do you, in case you're aggrieved as a business, in case how do you enforce your rights, your claims and rights? So of course, business is transactional and often there are disagreements. So how do you settle these agreements? So civil claims can be enforced through alternative dispute resolution. That is what we refer to as ADR, such as mediation, arbitration, and others, conciliation, and the like. Or you could go to court. We have a small claims court that handles disputes or claims of less than 10 million that are arising out of a contract. Yeah, 10 million. Then we have local council courts. These also have power to hear disputes. We have tribunals like the Tax Appeals Tribunal and the like. These also can entertain disputes. Magistrates courts, the High Court, Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. In case of criminal matters, you can report to the police for preventative action. Courts of law with the jurisdiction to handle criminal matters. You can report to these courts. Yeah, so this is the last or second last, but maybe before I talk about the startup legal checklist, it's also important to know that the government encourages sustainable business or sustainable activities, i.e. mindful of the environment. So we do have the National Environmental Management Act, which sets out how businesses should handle the environment, especially where your business is going to interact or is based on exploiting natural resources such as mining. So there's need to conduct what we call environmental and social impact assessments. So there will be need to do those, and all of those are regulated by an authority called the National Environmental Management Authority. So, and also mindful to note that the Uganda has ratified a lot of UN conventions, especially the Convention on doing, business principles, i.e. The convention that looks at harmonizing and ensuring that there's a respect of human rights, even as businesses grow and do business in Uganda. So it's very, very important that human rights are observed and respected, that when you work in Uganda, that you're mindful of the rights of the different individuals and communities. So having said that, my last thoughts are these. So when you want to set up a business, this is what the legal checklist would look like. You'd say, hi, first of all, what's the appropriate type of legal entity? So you look at your business, look at your strategy, and where you're going to be in the next 5 years, and say, what is it, what type, that should inform the type of entity. So you sit down with your lawyer, let him understand the strategy and where you want to go, him or her, and then agree on a legal entity. So sometimes it may be advisable to do a sole proprietorship instead of a company, depending on what you're doing, what your objectives are. And then it also be important to develop and sign all needed founder contracts. I've already talked about the contracts that you need to sign. So important that you put those in place. Then a lot of startups, technology driven, and you come up and innovative. So you need to protect all your intellectual property, including brand names, logos, patents, copyrights, domain names. Comply with capital market laws when raising capital. So when you're reaching out to VCs and the like, be mindful. Just know, make sure that you're in compliance. Yeah, that's a word. Comply with labor laws and employment laws. Institute management and operational policies for your business, e.g., human resource policies, risk management, crisis and emergency management policies. This allow you to be able, to address certain shifts in the market, such as we had, the COVID-19 pandemic. You'll need to also address, how you interact on social media and doing online business. So you need policies for that as well to protect yourself from, indemnify the company from, lawsuits and claims. Prepare contracts for customers, suppliers, employees, and other key third-party relationships. Take insurance, that's also advisable. So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thankful for your time. Thank you for listening to me. At this juncture, I'm happy to take questions from you. Thank you so much.
Hey, hello, Moses. Hello?
Yes.
Yes, Moses, how are you?
Thank you, I'm good.
Very, very, very wonderful presentation there by Moses Ngorok. Moses is one of our GEW Uganda partners for the 2021 Global Entrepreneurship Week. We thank everyone in the participant list for joining this wonderful presentation. We have some mentions like Abid Were, we have Alex Asea, Christopher Churiasima, Donald Waji, Dora K. Dora K happens to be one of our most entertaining and participating entrepreneurs. She seems to be very active, also engaging in the Enterprise Uganda Business Recovery Series. We have Joan Chokutamba, Lucky Chiomohanji, Mary Yamono. Oh yeah, Mary, how are you doing, Mary? Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. And we thank everyone else who has actually been able to join us this morning. It's now the afternoon after a very wonderful presentation from Moses. Moses, I don't know if there is anything else you wanted to talk to the participants about in case of any legal aid they might actually require to receive from you. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, we can have, we can discuss questions right now. That's okay. But if there's need for
we have some questions from Rachel. Rachel says, hello, everyone. Rachel Najuko from Saki Innovations Uganda Limited. Thanks, Enterprise Uganda. Actually, I was in the process of registering my employees with NSSF. Elaborate more on the process of obtaining patent rights.
All right, so thank you, Rachel. I'm grateful that you've joined today. How do you register your patent? One, a patent must meet 3 criteria in order to be registered. So usually the patent will be examined by scientists that sit at the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, the Intellectual Property Office. They'll be looking at ensuring one is your patent novel, is your product or whatever you want to patent novel, meaning that does not already exist in the world, across the world. And so if they're able to prove that, then that's the first criteria met. Second thing they'll be looking at has there been an innovative step, in the sense that, okay, it's new, but what work have you done towards developing this innovative stuff, meaning that they must be, okay, say like we have something that exists, say maybe let's talk about, give me an example of like a payment system. So currently, MTN, Airtel Money, so you have those two, and initially maybe you could not send money from Airtel to MTN or from MTN to Airtel, but then you come up with a new invention that allows cross-network transactions. So that would be considered innovative in the sense that it didn't exist. Then the other thing that they're going to look at is they're going to look at the aspect of industrially applicable, that whatever you've come up with is important for industrial use. Like if it cannot be used in any industry, and the industry here, we're not talking about only, we're not talking about Namamve, or we're talking about like any business. Like, can it be used by individuals in a business? So that's the other step that they look at. And if your innovation meets those steps, then they will go now ahead, examine it, and then register it. Yeah. But if it's new but is not innovative, it's possible to also register what we call a utility model. This is it's kind of like an inferior type of registration, but accords you the right to still enjoy ownership. But if you don't have an innovative step in your innovation, then we'll have a utility model. I don't know if I have. Of course, the forms can be gotten either from your lawyer, or you can also go to Uganda Registration Services Bureau, the Intellectual Property Office, and get all the relevant forms and pay the relevant fees. Yeah, and then get registered.
Right. Moses, thank you very much. I hope that answers the question that was passed on by Rachel. We have another question by Christopher that says, what's the difference between the corporate directors and the individual directors as required to be filled on Company Form 20?
Okay, so thank you, Christopher. So a corporate director is basically a director that is not a person, but is registered either as a company or a partnership limited by with limited liability. So basically it means it's an entity that has been registered with what we call corporate soul. Corporate soul meaning that this company or entity can represent itself, can sue and be sued in its own name. So legally they are considered persons, although not natural persons, yeah? And natural persons, but for legal purposes, considered people. So you can have a company as a director in another company. Yeah. And then of course, individual directors are persons. Yeah.
I think that must be all the questions. I don't know if there is anyone else that would like to ask a question. We see Ronald Ocho, we see Mr. Dr. Charlie. There's Rachel. Rachel is the one that actually asked the question. Monica Okumu. I don't know, anyone with a question before we actually push this to a close, because there are plenty of GEW activities running around. I don't know if anyone has actually been part of Moses, have you engaged any other GEW activities around?
Pardon?
Have you engaged any other global entrepreneurship celebratory activities in Uganda yet?
I this morning I went for breakfast. We had
breakfast. Yes, the breakfast which was at Caramel.
Yes.
Oh yes, the ecosystems breakfast.
Yes.
How did that go?
It was nice. It was fun. I started with a beat. we had good food. Thank you.
Mr. Ronald Mukasa happens to be one of our directors at Enterprise Uganda. He's on the meeting. Mr. Ronald, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I think thanks, George. I think just to say thank you to the team. Thanks, Moses, for this presentation. It was very eye-opening. I listened in and noticed that there's quite a bit to learn. I hope, Moses, we can be able to engage more and share with the entrepreneurial community even beyond the week. I think thanks so much for sharing. And guys, let's attend the rest of the events which are happening. Thanks for taking off time to come and learn. At Enterprise Uganda, we believe in continuous improvement, and this is just part of it. So thanks so much, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ronald. Thank you for having me, everyone, at Enterprise Uganda. I'm happy to continue working with you.
All right, we have some comments in the chat room. There's something from Mr. Ronald Ocho that says, well done, Moses, being a lawyer. I have been learning and appreciate that you've shared legal and financial wisdom. And then we have another comment from Mr. Christopher that says, would a company be required to declare taxes even if it has no TIN? I think that's a question. Mr. Moses, do you mind answering this one before we close?
Yes, yes, I can. And the answer is yes. You're required. Generally, you're supposed to have a TIN. It's a very requirement. It's a requirement. So if you don't get a TIN, and of course, the URA will definitely count backwards and make sure that you pay up that which you owed them even before you registered. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I think, Mr. Christopher, I hope that has answered your question. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this wonderful session by Mr. Moses from Wezi Consultants. Moses' number has actually been displayed in case you need to. There's another question by Belinda Moses.
Okay.
Can one use their individual TIN while trying to register the business?
Yes. If you are sole proprietorship, if you are sole proprietorship, then the owner and the business are the same. But also, I know that URA requires directors' TINs in order to register a company TIN as well. But yes, you can use your individual TIN if you are sole proprietorship, not a company.
So, question, Moses. So, do consultants qualify to be sole proprietors of a business?
Consultants can they can set themselves up either as a company, depending sometimes, or a partnership. Some type of consultants are required to be partnerships, like lawyers. You set up in a law firm, and also maybe medical practice. But in some situations, yes, you can be. No, it would be advisable, since you're providing services, advisable to have a company. So usually you set out, probably not as a sole proprietor, but a company, because I know we have a lot of freelance people, but these were required to register as companies. Very,
Right.
very important.
We have a request by Belinda Rona, who says, could you please redisplay Moses' number? Moses, if you don't mind, please redisplay your number again for the participants so that they can grab it in case of any other consultations required.
Okay, let me just do that. Just a moment. So there it is. I hope it's on. Yeah.
Right, that is Ronald Moses' number. In case anyone requires it, please. That is his number for any other purposes, be it a consultation. In case you want to join the practice of law, it's going to take a lot more than a phone number, though. that should suffice. That should suffice. Moses, again, thank you very much for being part of the Global Entrepreneurship Week, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. And with this,
thank you, Enterprise Uganda. Thank you, participants.
I'd like to bring this to a close so that the participants can actually catch up with the rest of their day and the rest of the GEW activities going on around.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.